Hi everyone, welcome to the next installment of DevTool Diaries, where we are joined by the wonderful Cecelia McElearney, who I will let introduce herself.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I am Cecelia McElearney, and I am the head of people at Instabase. And Instabase is an AI company, and we are actually an AI company that is focused on unstructured data. And what that really means is with our platform, what you're able to do is actually automatically understand, extract, analyze unstructured data and generate information really from any data source, be it a receipt, a handwritten note, passports, documents, really anything you name it. We're able to extract that data and provide you unparalleled accuracy.
Thank you, and thank you so much for being here. Super excited to have you on board as well. For anyone who didn't know Cecilia before they're watching this now, she was actually the first HR hire at Instabase all those years ago, and it's absolutely grown with the company. But yeah, if you could give the audience a little bit of insight to when you first joined Instabase and what your role has been and evolved to, that would be amazing.
Yes, it's been quite the journey. I've been at Instabase for 4 years. I actually just celebrated my Instaversary last week. But I joined the company as Instabase's first HR hire. So I came over as an HR business partner right at the height of the pandemic. So it was June of 2020. And that was definitely a time where the world still was thinking that the pandemic would last just a couple of weeks. And so there was a lot of strategy and back and forth of trying to figure out when will we be back in office. But it has been quite a journey joining a company thinking that you were going to be working in office, and then the world had to go fully remote, and figuring out how to navigate that aspect while onboarding and putting policies and structures in place.
I can imagine it was quite a journey, and keen to deep dive into that a little bit later on as well. But yeah, you mentioned being that first HR hire, bringing a lot of processes and policies in place. It'll be good if you could speak through these, maybe give a little bit of insight where you guys have offices and what your remote versus hybrid policies look like, just for some context as well.
Yeah, of course. So we are located across 4 different offices. We're headquartered in San Francisco, California, in the US. We have an office here in San Francisco, which is where I'm located. We also have an office in New York City. That's our second US office. We have an office in Bangalore, India, and we also have an office in London, England as well. And outside of those office regions, we also have employees that are based remotely throughout the US, throughout India, and then we have a couple of regions outside across EMEA, and a handful of folks that are also based in Canada as well. So we truly are a globally dispersed company.
That's awesome. And look, there's lots of folk who are working with AI at the moment, especially Gen AI, and looking to build these sort of teams. What would you like recommend to any other AI companies who are looking to start to build out their business and HR and people team? What should they do?
It's a great question. I think it really depends on what the focus of the company is, and what sort of AI that you're in. And that really helps you then understand what your strategy is going to be for the type of talent that you want to bring on board. And to answer a little bit of like the last question that you asked, Instabase was, prior to the pandemic, an office first culture. And just like many other companies that were obviously, we're all going, the world was going through the pandemic at the same time, and learning how to continue building a company, and navigating through uncharted terrains, and navigating through how do you continue building and building culture, and ensuring that the talent bar stays high, and that folks feel supported outside of actually working in a collaborative shared space together, because all of us were learning how to work from home and readjusting. And so our policy shifted from being an in-office first company to having to navigate through the remote world. And now we're in a hybrid space, because we do think it's really important to be able to allow our colleagues and our employees to be able to drop into an office and be able to work together and have that ease of knowledge transfer happen and build bonds and be able to experience the culture and what it feels like to be an Instabaser in the office space. And so if you are thinking through building out teams and companies, you should really be thinking about the strategy of, first and foremost, like, what kind of culture do you want to build in this new world order? Is it a company that that you want to have everyone be in office, or are you going to be a remote first company or hybrid? And that really helps you understand, your strategy first and foremost, but it also helps you understand where are you going to be able to actually find the talent that you're looking for. Because if you are going to say, we're only going to open up an office, a culture of being office only, and we're going to be in the office, 2, 3, 5 days a week, it does change the search for where you're going to be looking for your talent, because you will want to find your talent in the space, necessarily in the space where you're looking to open up your office, or you have to have a strategy of allowing folks to relocate. So that would be the first and foremost aspect of how I would approach starting off the search for finding the talent that you want to be able to bring in to help build your vision, mission, and dream.
Love that. And yeah, it's super important. There are definitely pockets of areas, the Bay Area, for example, where there are a ton of awesome talent. And from my experiences of recruiting in the US and Europe, there are absolutely more people in some pockets of area who are happier to be hybrid. And we're hearing it more and more now. People want to be able to go to the office now and then and have that human connection, but predominantly be able to choose themselves as well how frequently they're going, and not being totally mandated as well. So it's cool, and that is absolutely some brilliant advice as well. Talk to me a little bit like policies and processes that you've been involved with, because the audience may not know, but you joined Instabase when they were at Series B, got them all the way to Series D now. I can imagine headcount, priorities, landscape change. Anything worth highlighting there?
Yes, so I joined at Series B when we were roughly around 70-ish employees globally, and we're a Series C company today with around 300 employees globally. And so when I started, the first thing that I did was really sit down and obviously have a conversation with our CEO, who I have reported into throughout the 4 years. To really understand what his vision was for the company culture and what his thoughts were, what we needed from HR, and how to partner with him and our executive team and our managers across the board. And so I just collected a lot of notes, and I was very intentional of ensuring that when I came into the company that I needed to go into learning and fact-finding mode versus jumping right in and saying, here are the things that I would change and what we should be implementing immediately, because no two companies are the same. No two company cultures are the same. So it would benefit anyone who is in the role to really step in and actually learn and hear from your colleagues, your managers, your executives. So I had that meeting with Anant, and then what I did was also met with every single manager across the company to also hear from them what they thought was going well in the realm of people, what they thought we needed. And as a part of that process, it was also really important for me to have that conversation, because it allows you to have the opportunity to actually explain like what your role is in HR. Because I think that when you say you're in HR, when you say you're in people, folks understand recruiting, and it doesn't feel like it is a scary partnership. But when you say that you're in HR, there can be some I don't know if anxiety is the right word, but there can be a little bit of pause. And so it allowed the ability to be able to actually explain what the partnership would be like, how I operate in HR, how I think about it. And so it allows you to start building the foundations of a partnership and eliminate or erode whatever preconditioned notion there was about HR from a prior company, a prior experience, and what have you. And so that was really wonderful. So I met with all of the managers, took notes on what they also thought that the company needed, what was missing, what their focus is, what their teams needed. And in addition to that, because we were such a small company at the time, 70 folks, I also met with as many people that would be willing to take a Zoom call with me just to hear what their thoughts were, collated all of the feedback that I heard, and then was able to really build out and focus on like, here's what the top priorities I think are from the company based off of the conversations I've had, and be able to bridge that with what our executives also said the top priorities were for the company. When I came into the company, Anant, our founder and CEO, and Samit, who's the chief strategy officer, who I worked very closely with, had ideas of like, here are the things that we want you to be able to focus on in the first 6 months. And so it was just about collecting all of that information and then hitting the ground running. And then to answer your question directly, the first things that I focused on was the fact that the company had not yet had a formal performance review process in place. So it was thinking about what type of performance review process should Instabase have? What sort of tools do we need to bring on to actually support this performance review process? We didn't have leveling competencies put in place. It was about focusing on like, well, we need to first and foremost figure out how do we actually understand what our roles, levels, and responsibilities are, and how does that play into the performance review process. And then with that came a conversation around our compensation philosophy and compensation model. And so it was... it wasn't one project at once. To be able to roll out a performance review process meant that you were, I was jumping in and saying, okay, well, to be able to back into this performance review process, it really means that I now need to work with our executives and our hiring managers on level and competency, and I need to work on what our compensation philosophy is and how do we ensure that this is a performance-driven company. And so it was a handful of policies, initiatives, projects that were happening at the same time, which truly ended up being a really nice welcome relief at the height of the pandemic, because we were all stuck inside. And as I mentioned, I was living in San Francisco. I still am. And at that time we were sheltering in place. So we weren't allowed to be in grocery stores or restaurants. It was really like, you are hunkered down at home. And so having such like great meaty projects that I could really dive into and feel great about really also helped keep me sane being stuck at home, and fully focus on this new wonderful company that I joined.
So cool. So much as well that you would have done in such a short amount of time as well. But it is what you hear from folk when they work at a business, and what I also hear from folk who are deciding to leave, like, oh, I don't know what my next steps are. I don't know how I can grow here. It's not in place. And I think all of those things you mentioned are super important, especially if a business wants to scale and keep people. That
Yes.
retention piece, there's a lot of competition out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm career driven, and I know a lot of my colleagues are, I'm sure you are as well. And we all want to know, and even if you are happy in the role that you're in and the level that you're in, you do want to understand what the expectations are of you, how to ensure that you're performing to the expectations of what are expected for your role and level. But you also want to understand how to continue growing your career. And just as importantly, if you are thinking about internal mobility and switching careers, you also want to understand, what does it mean to be in this function, and how could I potentially move over and be able to do that? Because your background is in recruiting, so you know how hard it is to find great talent. And when you find great talent to bring into the door, you want to retain your great talent and continue learning from them, working alongside them. And so what better way to do that than to allow the ability to ensure that your talent knows how to grow alongside the pace of the company and has the ability to switch career paths. So yeah, it is all about retaining great talent.
Yeah. And you'd rather keep them somewhere in your business and let them go elsewhere, right? So having that policy in place so they can switch internally is super important as well. And I think just what you said about first when you started and speaking to as many stakeholders as possible, that's so important, isn't it? When you think of a people function and being able to break down barriers of what presumptively they may look or fear HR to be, and breaking that down as well. Something else we spoke about before, Cecelia, is more recently you brought your recruitment and HR folk closer together. Would you be able to give a little bit of background around the reasons for that and the impact it's made on you guys?
Yeah. So in the 4 years that I've been at Instabase, up until this year, 2024, our recruiting team and our HR team were two separate teams. So we had the recruiting function and the HR function. And when I say HR, it means like your HR business partner function, compensation, benefits, and then we also have an L&D aspect of it as well. But they were two separate teams. And even though we were two separate teams, almost the entirety that I've been here, it was always important to me to ensure that there is a bridge between the two teams. And so the HR team and myself always try to ensure that we were having conversations with our other stakeholders on the recruiting side, because really the overall people function is the function of the entire life cycle of an employee's journey. And so in more recent times, when in conversations that I've been having with our CEO, and similarly the conversations that our recruiting team and leaders in the recruiting function were having with the CEO, it really just made sense to actually bring the two teams together so that we could have like a great cross collaboration. We can really put all of our minds together in figuring out how do we best support the company, because the company and our colleagues are our customers. And with that, earlier this year, at the end of 2023, the CEO and actually some of the recruiting managers on the recruiting team asked me if I would consider stepping in and partnering with the team and bringing the two teams together and overseeing the function. And that aligned with my career aspirations. I really enjoyed working with the team. And so we brought the teams together, and now we're one overall people team. And the dynamic has been wonderful. I mean, we work on things from the start and inception of like thinking through the policy of like, how would this impact candidates and how we're thinking about recruiting and bringing great talent in? How does this impact our current employees? How do we want to roll this out? And so being able to think about things from the full life cycle structure of anyone's journey at the company has been a really great way for us to think about the impacts and how to roll policies and procedures out, and thinking through the questions and being able to answer them ahead of time. And so it's been a wonderful journey of like gelling the two teams together, because naturally I think that it makes sense for them to be together. And it's given us the great opportunity to really be able to partner with the company and their stakeholders from the full cycle, from the very start of like finding talent to navigating career paths together.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it makes sense to have them together as well, from the full life cycle of a potential employee to being an employee as well, right? And the information you can actually get on the market from potential new employees is also invaluable, because you can
Yes.
bring that into what you might want to add into your culture or benefits as well. So
I mean,
I
yeah,
think it makes sense.
absolutely. And to the point that you just brought up, I mean, even if you think about the world of compensation and benefits, you just mentioned benefits. In the industry, you look at compensation benchmarks a couple of times a year, because you're buying data from these large companies. But when you're able to couple what you're able to look at from benchmarks in addition to what you're hearing live on the ground that you're collecting from candidates, it really is a great formative way to help you stay ahead of the market and ensuring that you are incredibly competitive and that you have the right compensation bands in place. And similarly, same thing with benefits, because we want to ensure that the total package that we're offering to our new hires coming in, to our employees that are here, is remaining competitive, and that we are reducing whatever potential attrition risk there may be based off of compensation, based off of benefits. Like, we want to make sure that you are well looked after here, and that you aren't looking to leave for X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, such good points, isn't it? Yeah, coupling that with live information from people you're speaking with, it's spot on. Um, Sticking to that recruitment topic, because a lot of folk that might be listening to this will be wanting to grow their teams as well. And I think hiring is always one of the trickiest parts of growing, and retention sometimes as well. But what was your recruitment strategy in the earlier days, and how has that changed over time, and what are your biggest learns?
That's a great question. I love this question, because so much has changed through navigating through the last 4 years with the pandemic, but a lot has also stayed similar. And so, the values of the company have stayed the same, the talent bar has stayed the same, but how we go about interviewing, where we found our talent, in the world of everyone going remote, there was a lot of people that moved all over. And so, as I mentioned, excuse me, at the start of the call, Instabase had started off as being an office first and office only culture, where you were coming in just like many other companies. You were working from the office 5 days a week. But one of the things that changed was obviously our strategy of where we found our talents, because we had to open up and say, okay, people are moving. And we then went into the remote aspect of it. And so it really opened up the doors of where you can find your talent. I mean, we have amazing engineers that are based in Poland and Belgium, which, if we had stuck to the office only culture, we wouldn't have these great colleagues that are now helping like lead and form where we're going in the AI space. But so there's a lot, there was a lot of movement around like trying to stay ahead of the curve of how to stay competitive, where to find your talent. And then in addition to that, it's like, how do we ensure that we're staying as competitive as possible with compensation? What is our philosophy going to be around that? But the way that we've been interviewing and ensuring that we've kept the talent bar high has not changed. That has been consistent, and we have tried to stay as consistent as possible also of instilling what it feels to be an Instabase in the culture, which can have its challenges when you are when you are working remote and don't have the ability to drop by an office whenever you are able to do so. I failed to mention this in your earlier question about our office policy, but we are hybrid, and our hybrid policy is one where you're allowed to come into the office as often as you'd like, as frequent or as infrequent. So we don't mandate that you're in Tuesdays and Thursdays or Monday or Friday. And the thing that's beautiful is that we've seen that our colleagues and our employees are the ones who are actually driving the force of saying that they want the shared space, they want the collaboration. So it's been really nice to see that full cycle come through. But to go back to the question around recruiting, one of the other changes that we've seen just in the tech industry as a whole is throughout, there's been a lot of changes in how companies have gone through hypergrowth. Like Instabase went through hypergrowth in the realm of this pandemic and working remotely. And then in more recent times, we've seen the instability happen across the entire tech market. We've seen instability happen in the banking industry with a couple of banks fold. And so companies have started to go a lot more conservative with their hiring practices and approaches, and really thinking through, like, do we actually need that headcount? Like, let's ensure that we're not going to be putting ourselves in a precarious position. And so similarly, we've done something similar where it's like we want to ensure that we are being, and we have been, but we want to ensure that we're being as thoughtful as possible so that we're not going to be put in a position like you're still seeing a lot of companies, no matter what size, no matter how large they are or how small they are, still going through a lot of reduction of forces. And in this current climate and time, being a couple of years into the pandemic and seeing, and I'm not saying the pandemic is still here, but seeing that like there's been a lot of change and a lot of movement around folks leaving companies. For me, it really makes me think about how companies are still going through these mass layoffs and mass hiring structures without like learning from how do we be as intentional as possible? How do we use the resources like better use the resources that we have internally? How do we help continue growing folks and ensuring that we are out of this tumultuous like stage in the entire tech industry? Because things have gotten a bit better in the tech industry, but I don't think we're quite out of the stages that we're in right now, where we're as healthy as we were, a few years ago. And so, to answer your question more succinctly, we've gone through hypergrowth at Instabase. We've gone through a process of hiring in office only to being a lot more flexible, of hiring remote and hybrid now. And we've also gone through many exercises of ensuring that we are very intentional and thoughtful of what level we're hiring for, where we're hiring that individual, how that overall impacts the organizational structure, the team, the bandwidth capacity, et cetera. And as a part of that process, we've really partnered with our managers, hiring managers and executives to really empower them in thinking through what is the organizational structure and capacity model of your team? How does this level help your team? Do you need that level? Do you need something higher? Do you need lower level headcount and maybe multiple of them instead? So it really has facilitated great conversations around that and us thinking through what is the current stage we need today, what is the stage we need by the end of this year, and so forth, and how do we back into that so that we're able to be successful and hit the goals and targets that we have for the team and the company and our mission, and how do we back into that with the headcount that we have today that we're looking to recruit for.
I love what you said about being intentional with everything that you do, because I think the past few years with the disruption in the tech market, you forget that it is people's lives that are being affected negatively from unintentional, I guess, hiring plans as well. So yeah, these things do happen, but the more intentional and the more thoughtful you can be about the decisions that you make, definitely the better. And it sounds like it's been an awesome journey for you folks as well. You mentioned really partnering with your hiring managers and really working together to think about the longevity and the long-term plans of the teams and what they really need as well. Have you seen any, or have you implemented anything else in terms of coaching your hiring managers on recruitment best practice?
Oh, that's a great question as well. So the way that our team operates, both on the recruiting side and the HR side, I fundamentally believe that our function, the people function, while we are our own team and we have our passions and the things that we want to bring into the company and the policy and the structure, I think it's just as crucial and just as important that we feel as embedded in the functions that we support so that we truly understand what the needs are of your customer success team, of your engineering team, of your finance team, or whatever function it is that you're supporting. And we are specific in, we have HR business partners and recruiters that focus on specific functions. And the reason I say that is because when you are building a strong partnership with your hiring managers, you have a set cadence of meetings with them, regardless of if you have 5 headcount that you're helping hiring for, or 1 or even none at the moment, because recruiting ebbs and flows per team and what the needs are. It's still important to keep that cadence and understand what is top of mind for the manager. What are we thinking about? Like what projects, what things are we about to shift from a company perspective that we need to be able to figure out, like if we're going to ship this in Q4 of this year, how many additional resources do we need? And by when will we need that? So we can start thinking through okay, well, it can take us 3 to 4 months to find this specialty role. And so our team is joining the functions all hands, be it the EPD all hands, the go-to-market all hands, the customer success all hands. We have the set cadence with each of the hiring managers and really built that foundation so that when we are thinking about this is the role that this hiring manager has mentioned that they need, we already have the context of some of the context of this is what they're focusing on. This is what the team structure looks like. This is what some of their bandwidth capacity issues have been, or this is what we're thinking about jumping into, so that there's already a strong partnership and understanding of the function, their team, etc., so that it allows an ease of flow of like, oh, okay, got it. Yes, this is why we need this type of profile versus like what we hired for here because of this new project that we're about to launch, and or this was the piece that like is missing that the team now needs to be able to like gel it all together. So building that partnership has been crucial. And then I think similarly, it allows the hiring manager, our managers in general, be able to come to us and say, I'm thinking about this and I just want to start having a thoughtful conversation about it, even though I may not be ready for it yet, both in the realm of HR and in recruiting. And it allows you to be thought partners together in doing what's best for the company, our employees, our colleagues. So building that foundation has been crucial with all of our stakeholders and really makes, I think, all of our lives easier. And it also helps you just remember, re-understand that every single one of us, no matter what function, what role we're in, our plates are very full. So it gives you a lot more empathy of saying, that's okay. Like, it's okay that we can't do like this screen today, but we need to start thinking about the fact that like, if we need to hire someone and we want this individual in this seat, say in 3 months time, here's how we're going to back into it. And here's how much of your time we need. And it can feel like a lot of time commitment, but this is crucial. And it can be maybe a little bit painful while also trying to juggle everything else that's on your plate and getting, you know, everything done in the same short amount of time you have in the day. But in the long run, this is going to help you and your team so much more. And just being able to have those type of conversations are much easier once you have that foundation built.
The whole time you were speaking, all I was thinking is this genuinely sounds like a true partnership, like understanding one another and the bandwidth constraints you may have, but also having that openness and transparency, like, okay, we do need this amount of time to make a certain hire, and let's invest it up front so we're not wasting it further down the line. And it's important. It sounds amazing that you guys have got that. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I feel truly lucky to work at Instabase. We have such wonderful talent, and the people here make it so wonderful.
I can feel it. That's amazing. One thing that you said a couple of questions ago is something that hasn't changed throughout your time in Instabase has been keeping the bar high on who you are hiring or how you're doing your hiring process. Can you give us a little bit of insight on that? How have you kept the bar, I guess, and what can you practically advise folk in terms of like an interview process to make sure that it is, I guess, equitable but keeping the bar high?
Yeah, that's that's a great question, especially when it comes around the time when you're going through hypergrowth, because when you're going through hypergrowth, you want to be able to obviously hire as quickly as possible. And with that, some things can just naturally slip. And so you have to be very intentional. And so you have to be very intentional in building out what is the job description that you're looking for? What level are you looking for? Is this a role where you can say it can be an L5 or an L4, or it can be an L5 or an L6, like being very intentional of like what it is that you're looking for from that regard. Building out the interview plan in advance and like focus areas and who the individual is going to be the interviewer, their focus area. And I think just as importantly, especially when you're going through like hypergrowth or you need the role as quickly as possible, having a secondary interviewer that can jump in so that if someone's out of office, on vacation, or sick, things don't slow down. You have the other partner that can jump in who is in lockstep and knows what what is needed for that panel and is able to vet it out just as well. And so having those key priorities in place and ensuring that you have a fair and equitable panel, ensuring that notes are being, the notes from the interview process, the debrief notes are submitted in a timely fashion so that there isn't any loss of information. And when you're going through the panel, of just sitting down and ensuring that we are thinking of things from a way of like, okay, this is what we're actually looking for. This is the criteria, and also just checking to make sure that like certain words or other notions don't creep in for bias. So that is also implemented, and just having cross-functional feedback, and then ensuring that we are comfortable saying that this person has X, Y, and Z that's amazing, but this is the reason why we can't move forward. And I know that we needed this role yesterday, but it's just as important to this individual as it is to the company that we don't move forward with this, because it wouldn't be fair to bring someone in and not have them be successful, and then it wouldn't be fair for the company or the team to bring in someone and also not have that work. So we are also very we have to get very comfortable with saying, like, this is just going to be a longer search. And we're going to have to figure out how to continue moving forward with the bandwidth that we have internally while we are still searching for that right person here, and not making a hire or compromising on a hire that we may not think is the right hire for the company, because that wouldn't be fair for the individual or for the company itself. And we are very intentional in ensuring that, like, this is also going to be what's best for the individual coming in as well, because it is a symbiotic relationship. Like, when you're interviewing, while you are the interviewer, like, you're selling yourself and what your capabilities are, but just as importantly, you need to be vetting out, is this company right for me? Is it going to be meeting what my goals are, what I want for my career, what I think I'm passionate about, etc. Because if you think about it, we really spend so much time at work, probably more than like anywhere else in the days that we are. And we want to ensure that our time is well invested and it is achieving our overall company goals, our individual goals. Because I personally believe that when you join a company, you should be growing not just professionally, but you should be growing personally as well, so that you are able to continue achieving what you want to achieve at your current company. But you should also be able to take what you've learned to build the foundation blocks of whatever it is that you need next. So we're very intentional with that with our hiring process. But we also think, like, we also make notes around, like, what it is that this individual's career capabilities, or not capabilities, excuse me, career aspirations are. And I think coming back to the earlier question you have around, like, the full people function being one, it's also crucial to understand that when you're going through the performance review process and having the context from the conversations that your HR business partners are having with the individual and the managers, of saying, like, okay, well, Jane Doe or John Doe's career aspirations and some of their strengths they have are in this area, but their current role or the capacity that they're in right now doesn't allow for this. Like, when you're going through performance review process, it's like, well, what about, like, adding this project and so forth, and being able to then say, like, okay, here's the full spectrum of how someone can continue growing and expanding, and allowing them to really flex on their skill sets and take on new challenges and strengths and so forth. So having that full cycle with the team really come together, I think is crucial in helping ensure that the folks that we bring into our company can be as successful as possible and have the support system that they need outside of just their manager, because obviously that's a very important and crucial relationship that you have with your manager and the function and your team, but also having your cross-functional teams also support you and having that as a resource as well.
Awesome. What I was hearing at the beginning as well is that there's a lot of time and investment went into having a super slick process and everything in place first and foremostly. And that is important as well. Hiring can't be an afterthought. Otherwise, you do come into issues where, like you said, you don't want to hire someone when you know it might not be the right environment for them, or vice versa as well. So
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. I've heard as well I really liked what you said about making sure you're getting that interview feedback really quickly as well. And I hear of a lot of companies who will make sure that the scorecard is anonymous for each other person who's been part of the interview process, to try and remove any bias as well, which I do think is important as well. But yeah, I guess you've always got to be iterating on these things and seeing what's working well for you folks personally as well. Another topic, obviously, you've got a lot of people in different offices, right? 4 continents, and you've also got some folk who are working remotely. How have you gone about creating a feeling of belonging at Instabase?
Yes, it can certainly have its challenges when you are working in a remote world. But I think one of the things that have been really eye-opening for me has been working at Instabase, because prior to Instabase, I've always worked for companies where I was working in the headquarters. Even though we had offices all elsewhere, I was always in the headquarters. So I was in the time zone where the majority of the company and the executive team was sitting. And then the experience at Instabase, coming in and navigating through how will the company function, be in office, hybrid, etc. It really is eye-opening to make you think about what is the experience like if you are not in headquarters, if you are joining via Zoom, and the time difference, and that allows our company to really think through, how do we actually communicate with each other? How do we ensure that, like, if people are in the same time zone or in the same office, that the folks that are joining us via Zoom can obviously first and foremost hear you, and how do you ensure that they have just as much capability being very embedded and involved in the conversation and aren't like cut out or over dominated by the folks that are in the room. And so just going through the muscles of that over the course of the last few years, and the fact that, like, no matter what meeting you're in at Instabase, you are going to have colleagues that are joining via Zoom, be it from like India or London or Switzerland or France or what have you, or Canada. You really think through a lot of different things of, is this the right time frame of when the timing of when this meeting should be taking place? Because, India, for me, I'm in San Francisco, is either 12 or 12 and a half hours ahead of us. So you have to be very intentional of the timing of that, and how to ensure that it's inclusive, and thinking through, like, well, what was their day like beforehand, and does this meeting make sense, and so forth, of the time frame of it. But so there is a strong culture of like how we communicate with each other. We communicate via Slack, that's our main form, and ensuring that like there isn't going to be a blocker of like information. The knowledge and transfer and sharing needs to happen in a consistent basis via Slack, in addition to emails, so that if I'm winding my day down and getting ready to log off and shut down, that may be when India is starting to log in, and because I'm shut down, they shouldn't have their day stalled or slowed down for an answer from someone in the US, and vice versa, and same with London. So the communication is something that is super crucial and key to get right. But then in addition to that, it is ensuring that you have the ability to bring folks together, be it virtually or in person. I personally think that there really isn't any true substitute to in-person time and bonding and meeting your colleagues face to face. I think that makes a world of a difference. And so we've been intentional in ensuring that we have company offsites. So every January, our India region comes together for an India all hands, and it's a full week, and it's a beautiful offsite where they get together, and it's focused on what our vision and strategy and roadmap is, with a great healthy mix also of like social time. So and there are cultural aspects to it. So with our India offsites, there are cricket matches. And I was there in January, and I learned a lot about cricket. It was an amazing experience. And then we had an Americas and EMEA offsite, and that also had its cultural aspects of it as well, and bonding. But in addition to that, we also have teams that get together, and we are trying to do a lot more of gatherings in regional places, so that you are able to meet each other even if you're not on the same team, and a lot of virtual aspects as well. But each of our office has its own like macro cultural differences. So SF feels a little bit different than New York versus London or in India, but I also think that that's also a very beautiful difference. And when you visit those offices, it's so nice. So like when I'm in London, when we go out to the pub after and grab a meal there, it's a little different than how it is in San Francisco, where we're going on our coffee walks and what have you. And so there is a strong pulse and undercurrent of like what it feels like to be an Instabaser, with the communication, the intellectual curiosity, and the feeling of wanting to help each other. But each region has something that's slightly a little bit different that really gels and makes it all beautiful in itself when it comes together.
Love that.
Yeah.
And I think every person I speak to says that offsites mean a lot. Just quarterly or half a year, well, once a year, just getting together. It is so nice. It does make the
So
difference
fun.
as well. So
Yeah.
good. It sounds like an awesome culture for sure. So last topic, we spoke a little bit about this when you joined Instabase, right in the midst of the pandemic. Lots of processes that you thought might have had to be put in place and then had to get rid of and then change at the last minute. Let's speak about like the return to office, speak about that whole situation in time, the biggest learns.
Oh, goodness, yes. So at the start of the pandemic, I think the entire world really just didn't know what we were about to go through. And so I think it's safe to say that many companies, along with us, were thinking through what our return to office policy would be like. And so I remember when I first joined, and we were sheltering in place. That was mandated by the states and the countries that we were in. Excuse me. And I remember when I first started, I went into the office space that we had just locked in the lease with before the pandemic hit, which I'm sure so many companies had done as well. I remember going in and really thinking through like, okay, this desk can be occupied, but this desk cannot, and then putting together a policy of like how we were going to return to office, how we were going to be safe, and there were so many questions around the vaccine, which also was a thing in and of itself to navigate, no matter what country you're in. And so we went through a couple of iterations, I think literally 2 iterations of what a return to office policy would be like. And then none of that worked because of the waves that kept happening and folks getting pretty sick across the entire world. And then I sat there and had a conversation with our executive team. And the third return to office policy we came out with, I was just very upfront and honest in saying, we don't know how this pandemic is going to continue. And it is safe to say no one in this world actually knows how this pandemic is going to continue and what twists and turns we're going to see. So instead of coming forward and saying to you, here's what the new policy is, and we'll return to office in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, we're just going to say this is status quo. We don't know. No one in the world knows. It is this until we actually are able to see quite a lot of change happen and we feel like it is safe to bring people back. And then at that point is when we'll come to you and say, this is what it will mean whenever that day comes. And with that, we also had an FAQ guide around like, if I move, what does that mean for me about moving? So we were able to kind of really figure out what sort of questions will anyone have, and what sort of questions will anyone have about returning to office and what that means for them and their families and their overall structure to their lives and their days. And so if you fast forward to where we are today, we are a hybrid company. We have folks who are remote because that's where we hire them. That's where they live, and they're functioning in their areas. And we're not saying like you have to come back to the office. But we also have our office hubs, and we have seen that our colleagues and our employees want to be going into the office more frequently. And so with that, we've returned, the policy of like, well, this is what your meal stipend is if you're in office. Here's all of the amenities that you do get from being in office. And as we think about the future state, we don't have any dates of like we have to be in office X amount, like anything like that set in place. This is something that I actually think is quite beautiful about the structure that we have, where it is voluntary. It does allow you the flexibility and ability to come in and say, personally, I'm going to work from the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because I really need that focus time. I want to be around our colleagues, and we have this team meeting, and it just, that flow of knowledge share. But it also gives you the flexibility of being like, well, I actually need to take my child to school this day, so I can't come in, or I have this appointment, or I have this with my pet, or whatever it may be. It gives you the flexibility and understanding of like, well, this is what like our lives are actually like, and we want you to be able to show up and do your best work and be your best self, but we also understand that flow and flexibility of it. That said, we are intentional of ensuring that like the hires that we have that we're bringing on board are close to our office hubs, so that they do now have the ability to drop in as often as they would like, and have that ease and flexibility of it. So we are being intentional and thinking through, what does our 3-year plan look like? And if we do think that we'll be back in office in whatever time frame, how do we make that as easy as possible on folks? And so we are thinking through, like, with our hiring strategy, let's go ahead and just ensure that folks are close enough to the office where it is an easier commute for them.
Makes sense. All I heard was honesty is best policy, and then let people choose what's going to be best for them. But
Yeah,
it definitely was the way to do it, wasn't it? It was a crazy time. So thank God we're on the other side.
I agree. I could not agree more.
Awesome. So, closing question from me would just be, is there anything that you would like to add at the end? Any advice for folk who may be in a similar position to yourself or moving to a growing company, and what that would be?
That's I love that. I think I would just maybe echo the sentiments that we talked about at the start of the call. You know, to constantly be in learning mode really, I think, helps you build strong partnerships with your stakeholders and actually understand the nuances and the needs of the business, the functions you support, the function that you're in. So when you're in that like constant learning mode, the intellectual curiosity, I think it really helps you show up as a better and great colleague and employee, and for yourself understanding like what your desires and needs are and how they fit into your career path. But it also helps you understand how to bridge the gap or be able to solve problems and what have you, because if you are learning and have as much information as you have or you possibly can have in your hands, it allows you to choose the best outcome possible for you, your teams, your company, your path. So to stay in that consistent learning mode. And then the last piece I will say as a plug is Instabase is hiring. We have many open roles. If you look at our career site, reach out to me, reach out to our recruiting team. We are hiring across every single region that we have at the company and across every single function, be it G&A, EPD, GTM. So we're looking to bring on the next Instabaser.
Yeah, so if you liked anything that Cecelia said, which I think you will, feel free to reach out to her. We'll tag her LinkedIn bio below as well. But Cecelia, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it. Take care.
Not